Rotation is about to take place in the Pokemon TCG just like every year, and I know a lot of us are very nervous and wondering what will happen. What will the new metagame look like when Charizard, Goldingo, and Gardevoir are no longer around? Now, there's still a little over a month to go for that, but over in Japan they are already playing with the new format, and this weekend there will be a Champions League in Fukuoka on the 21st of February. I don't think the first day will be streamed, but day 2 will be live streamed, which is pretty cool, and we will get to see these new decks in action at the highest competitive level over in Japan. Now, it is very important to mention that they do play best of 1 only for pretty much every single tournament other than the national tournament, and we play best of 3. So their results not always align with what we can expect over on our side of the world, just like what we see online doesn't always reflect what happens at our regionals, but will definitely give us a solid idea and a solid starting point. And we do have a little bit of information already with all the city leagues happening and all of these decks getting played right now. But with this big tournament happening and with no real base for people to look for them, right? There isn't like previous tournament results in this brand new regulation J format, I think it is, or I don't remember what letter it is, but there aren't any results to base it on. So deck building plays a major role in these new tournaments, especially in the very first one. That's always when we see unexpected things, and even though we can give ourselves an idea of what's happening already in the format with the City League results, I think if you're a serious player over in Japan, you're probably saving the best for that day. So today we're going to be taking a look at a lot of decks that have shown potential so far, but like I said, these city leagues have to be taken with a grain of salt. They don't necessarily represent what we will be eventually seeing do well in the Champions League. And Champions League tournaments should also be taken with a grain of salt, as we did see for Alligator win a whole tournament in Japan. It took everyone by storm. It was very unexpected. People are buying for Alligators left and right. And then over on this side of the world, it never really took off. So take it with a grain of salt, but this is a good preview of what we can expect in the post-rotation metagame. Starting us off, we have Dragapult Dusknoir. Good old reliable, probably will remain as a top deck in the very near future. It is currently one of the big 4 of the metagame, and that should not change with rotation. Of course, we lose some key pieces like Luminous Energy, Iono, and Counter Catcher, but all decks lose that, and Dragapult does gain a few new interesting things, such as Meowth EX with its really cool ability. You get to search your deck for a one-off supporter, which usually Dragapult didn't play things like Crispin or Briar because they were very hard to find at the right time when you needed them, right? You need to play multiple copies of your supporters so that you could reliably find them with Recon Directive or Serendipity Draw. However, now that you can directly search them off an Ultra Ball with Meowth EX's ability, playing Briar at the right time, especially with all the prize manipulation you have through Dusclops and Dusknoir abilities, makes this card so much stronger. And this deck can really get away with playing on first stamp. It did so in the past, and now that we can search for Crispin to advance our energy attachments, we can Crispin and on first stamp out of the blue, which is really, really powerful, similar to playing an Iono plus a Neo Upper to tip things in your favor when that happens. So Dragapult Dusknoir, a familiar combination that I'm sure a lot of players who are already very comfortable with the deck will continue playing and should play out very similar to the current format. Less disruption, of course. Iono no longer here, and Counter Catcher not available either for those cool looking plays, but Dragapult is still Dragapult, and Phantom Dive just as powerful as ever. Next we have Mega Lucario, which will finally have its moment to shine now that Gardevoir EX is rotating, and I think that applies to a lot of decks in this list and the format in general. The loss of Gardevoir, Gardevoir had a pretty big stranglehold on the metagame, and now Mega Lucario with no powerful psychic type Pokemon that can just power something out of the blue like Gardevoir could, Mega Lucario with its very powerful attacks should have a much higher chance to shine. Both its first attack to power other things up and Mega Brave just doing so much damage makes this deck very viable. And then of course we have Premium Power Pro to boost that damage, we have Fighting Gum for early game consistency, finding basic Pokemon or Fighting Energy, we have Hariyama's ability which acts as a boss's orders, and we even have the Lunatone Soul Rock combination for future draw, giving us extra draw power throughout the whole game and also powering up that Lucario's first attack to get those energies into discard ball and then back into play with our jabs. So a lot of synergy between the cards. I think all the fighting support that has come out and seems like it will continue to come out will be very good for Mega Lucario, and I expect big things from this deck. Next up we have Alakazam to Dunsparce, which once again, it's currently a deck that is being played in decent numbers. It has gotten some decent results so far, but I feel like after rotation, after Gardevoir is gone, Alakazam should have a much better time overall in rotation. Now, of course, Dragapult is still an issue, and that's why we have 4 Battle Cage and Psyduck in the deck, and the new Psychic Special Energy will also really benefit this deck, allowing you to find more basic Psychic Pokemon when you attach it, allowing your Abras to multiply very quickly, and then you just have to worry about getting those to Dunsparce or the Dunsparce into play, ready to evolve and be able to draw all the extra cards. And then with Enriching Energy, with Wondrous Patch, you generally have all the support you could possibly want. The deck doesn't lose too many key pieces other than perhaps Counter Catcher, I want to say. So overall, I think this deck has a very bright future in the coming months. Then we have Marnie's Grimmsnarl with Frostlass and Munkidori, another powerhouse that currently is being played, and it does lose Iono. It also loses Technical Machine Devolution, so 2 very key pieces for this deck's success. Like I said, all the decks lose those pieces, so we're on even playing ground. And with the gain of Pokepad, with access to Spikemuth Gym, the combination of Frostlass, or the synergy between Frostlass, Grimmsnarl, and Munkidori is especially strong. And a well-timed Body plus Unfair Stamp with all that residual damage coming in from Freezing Shroud is certainly going to put a lot of players in a lot of pressure. So I would not be surprised if this deck becomes a top tier deck. It currently is battling for that top tier status, but I feel like after rotation, even though Gardevoir is gone and it loses that very good Charizard matchup as well, I do expect that Grimmsnarl will continue to be a very good deck with its self-sustaining ability. Next we have Zoroark EX, which finally gains its partner in Zekrom. Now we will be able to play finally with Zekrom right before rotation for a few weeks, but I think Zoroark's best and most powerful version is going to come very soon once we have rotation and once we have access to that Zekrom and the Meowth EX as well. Meowth EX having the possibility to search for Janine's Secret at the perfect time, or searching for Petrel to find your own first stamp, or searching for boss for game. I think the extra damage output from Zekrom and all the extra resources that you will be able to get and consistency through Meowth and through Pokepad as well will just combine perfectly with Zoroark's trade ability and the versatility that you gain by having access to copying attacks such as Darmanitan, such as Zekrom, and even Reshiram, which makes your opponent think twice before attacking into your Zoroark. So overall, I think we are already seeing Zoroark dominate, mostly by a very limited amount of players, but I do feel like Zoroark will just continue to get better and better as time goes on, and it will be a deck to watch out for when rotation happens. Next we have Mega Venusaur EX, which just like many of these decks, with Golingo going away from the format, I do feel like it will finally be Mega Venusaur EX's time to shine. Also coincidentally, Grimmsnarl and Zoroark are also decks that are weak to grass, so the typing is still very relevant, and the deck gains a very powerful new attacker in Mega Meganium EX as well. Now, I'm not sure if playing Mega Venusaur to transfer the energy and heal and whatnot, which we can now search for the Wild's Compassion directly thanks to Meowth EX, but overall I'm envisioning perhaps either Mega Venusaur, like something like this build will be very good, or maybe just a very thick Meganium line will be very good with Meganium and Mega Meganium and the Ogre Pawns and a bunch of energy switches to just move your energy around without having to set up another stage 2 and being able to just dish so much damage thanks to that Meganium EX's attack. So overall, this deck very powerful, and I think we are yet to see its best version to come out in the near future, especially with Goldingo being gone, and Raging Bolt, the other big 1-hit KO deck, still remains viable. We're actually going to take a look at it in a little bit down the line, but in a much weaker version, I would say. So Mega Venusaur, all the potential in the world, super high HP, very good synergy between all the grass type cards, and Forest of Vitality, of course, will make it so that every grass type evolution released in the near future should be explored, because being able to instantly evolve is just so broken. Next we have Garchomp EX, all the Cynthia cards have so much synergy, and having 400 HP thanks to the Power Weight tool card feels super broken. You also have a self-sustaining engine with the first attack, which can increase its damage with Roserade, and even Premium Power Pro as well, which is very cool to see. You have Spiritomb for that sneaky attack, taking advantage of a heavily damaged Garchomp, and this deck I feel like has a lot of potential. I'm not sure how good it will actually end up being, but with the 1KO decks going away, it should have potential. Now the grass weakness, if Meganium and the Force of Vitality does make grass decks pretty powerful, could be a very big hindrance and the one thing that holds this deck back. But having access to the new Fighting Energy, which is essentially a mist energy for fighting types, makes this deck immune to something like Alakazam, for example. So that should really help in making Garchomp a bit more viable. Also makes the fighting type Gibbles and Gabites immune to the Phantom Dive damage counters as well. So between that and Psyduck, I do feel like this deck has a lot of potential. Its biggest issue still being the fact that with your second attack, once you use it, there's generally no real way or no viable way to repower up for back-to-back powerful attacks. And so that's going to be a big issue usually for this deck. And like I mentioned, Raging Bolt, I do think is still going to be viable. Of course, we lose Professor Shadow's Vitality, the key card for these ancient Pokemon, but if you've been keeping up with current tournaments, you are seeing that Raging Bolt isn't even playing 4 of that supporter anymore. It's usually focusing heavily on Crispin, focusing on a more era sort of build, which this deck doesn't have. I would not be surprised to see Noctowl come back into the deck. Meowth EX, of course, being very good, but also a big liability and a 2-pricer Pokemon as well, though it does take up less space, but you can use it to find your Carmine, your Boss, your Crispin or whatnot, just like Noctowl, but in a more direct way without having to evolve. And now with all these energies and being able to play Psychic Energy for even Clefairy, which technically counters the big 2 decks in Dragapult and Mega Lucario, alongside having Kangaskhan and Fezandipiti as a draw engine, I do think the 1KO power of Raging Bolt is not to be underestimated. I think with Sada gone, if people just assume nothing can 1KO you, right, or none of those decks are viable, Raging Bolt could actually make its way in the metagame, especially if we start to see a big focus on Mega Pokemon which are worth prize cards. Next, we have a pretty unique rogue deck sort of thing, which has been seeing success in Japan. Like I mentioned, we have the Okidogi, which does 70 damage, but if you have Darkness Energy attached, not only do you get 100 extra HP, but you're also hitting for 100 extra damage. So with a Prism and a basic fighting, you're having a 230 basic single prize attacker that's dishing consistent 170 damage. You even have Monkey Dory to help yourself as well, since you're already playing those dark energies, and you have Barbaracle. The new Barbaracle is the key. It's released to go in tandem with Mega Zygarde EX, but I don't think that Mega Zygarde EX will be too viable with Barbaracle having that fighting type specific energy acceleration, which also doesn't need to be onto the bench, which is usually a restriction you see for these sort of cards. You can attach to the active with its ability. The energy acceleration from Barbaracle, along with all the fighting type support we already have with Fighting Energy, the Zoroark Lunatone engine, and this deck doesn't run them, but Premium Power Pro, I do feel like this deck could have some potential in there. And we have the new supporter as well, which recovers up to 4 Fighting Energy or Pokemon from the discard pile and puts them back into your hand, giving you extra energy to power up with Barbaracle, giving you extra energy to draw with Lunatone, or recovering pieces and attackers in order to continue applying pressure. So overall, high hopes for this deck. We'll have to see if it ends up playing out as good as I think it could be. Next, we have Mega Diancie with Dusknoir. I feel like this deck was not immediately obvious or being played when rotation happened in Japan, but it's been a deck that has been slowly getting traction as the metagame has been evolving over there. I do follow some Twitter accounts from Japanese players and Japanese websites that showcase Decklist that are doing well and whatnot at City Leagues, and Mega Diancie is slowly but surely breaking ground and being able to power up with that Wondrous Patch, having the new Psychic type special energy to get all your extra Duskulls, Clefairy, Latias, whatever else you need with that energy attachment is super powerful. And with Power Glass, you can easily attack back to back with Mega Diancie without even having to rely on the Wondrous Patch. And of course, there are other powerful Psychic type Pokemon such as Frillish with the item lock and the Flutter Mane, which you can actually use Flutter Mane with a boss's orders to bring up your opponent's Psyduck or Golduck and be able to use Curse Blast once again. So there's a lot of synergy between all these cards. I would not be surprised to see this deck actually do quite well overall. And even with the combination of Carmine, Mystery Garden, and Ultra Ball, I could also see turn 1 attacks being very, very easily achieved thanks to Mega Diance's very low cost, same as Clefairy, right? And with Meowth being able to directly search for that Carmine on turn 1, so you can see a bunch of cards immediately. Next up, we have Team Rocket's Honchkrow. I know a lot of people are really wishing that Team Rocket's Mewtwo with speed ups was viable. The combination of those two typings actually seems pretty good. Psychic and Grass, of course, being very, very good types, very good offensive types at the moment. But overall, we're not seeing too much success from that, but rather Honchkrow has been having a lot more success. It's a single price Pokemon that can 1KO anything in its path. Imagine discarding 6 supporters with Honchkrow and taking down a Mega Pokemon for 3 prizes when they only take 1. So I do believe that this deck has potential. So far, its biggest enemy, of course, has to be Dragapult, even though we have Articuno to limit damage counters being placed on our basic Pokemon. The recovering off of an unfirst stamp for this deck feels very, very difficult, almost luck based entirely. So I think the prevalence of unfirst stamp is one of the big things that is holding Honchkrow back, but overall it does seem to be the better Team Rocket's deck at the moment. And the last deck I wanted to talk about is Mega Kangaskhan with Buffaland. Now, of course, this deck, and apparently I took away a Mega Kangaskhan from the list by mistake. Mega Kangaskhan with Buffaland, of course, is already a current archetype. I actually think it just won EUIC in the senior division. Obviously not a list like this one, but if you account for like the top decks in the metagame, which are like, or the expected top decks in the metagame, which are probably Lucario, Dragapult, and Alakazam, with Mist Energy, you can soft counter Alakazam. And with, I mean, of course, they can have Enhanced Hammer, but once you have like Psychic type attackers, thanks to Crispin, right, you can even attack with Latias EX. Latias EX 1KOs Mega Lucario. Lili's Clefairy can 1KO Dragapult and Mega Lucario as well, so that's really, really cool to see. And then for everything else, you have Mega Kangaskhan tacking hits and healing with Jumbo Ice Cream and Monkey Dory. So I do feel like this deck has some potential at the very least. Another very cute thing I think I liked about this list, which honestly is the reason why I ended up including it, is the Lugia EX. With its attack Hyper Whirlpool, you flip coins until you flip tails, and for every head, you can discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. Now, this might not seem like a lot, but Lugia EX has 220 HP, and then you have the Buffaland for extra damage reduction, and then you also have the ice creams and even the handheld fan and the lively stadium. So taking down the Lugia is not going to be very easy at all, and if Lugia gets a sneaky heads in somewhere or a double heads at one point, that could honestly ruin someone's day, and it could generally win you the game on the spot if you flip that heads at the right moment. So I feel like there's something there with the Lugia tankiness happening in this particular list. It also has Moochum to accelerate psychic energy, so overall, I do like it. Of course, losing Technical Machine Energize is a pretty big blow for this deck, but overall, I feel like this has some potential depending on how the metagame shapes up. And that's it. That's it for our preview. Of course, there are other decks that could be talked about, such as Slowking, such as Festival Lead. There's many variants of Dragapult as well being played with Noctowl and Blaziken and many other combinations. So that's the cool thing about post-rotation. I think we're about to enter an era where 3 of the top 4 decks are going away, and that should lead to some creativity, at least initially, yeah? And then eventually things will settle down and we will have the top decks at the very top and people complaining about them, just like it has happened for the last 25 years that I've been playing Pokemon. But at least for now, we are in for a very interesting time in the Pokemon TCG. I'm personally very excited about post-rotation and playing against decks that are not that are not Charizard, Gardevoir, and Gholdengo all the time. Of course, Dragapult remains, but even Dragapult has to adapt to the loss of resources it has, and I'm sure people will come up with creative ways to beat Dragapult. Like, people are already thinking, oh no, everyone's going to be playing Dragapult, it's going to be 80% Dragapult. Well, if that's the case, that becomes a very easy metagame to counter, right? And whoever finds the key way to beat Dragapult will be heavily rewarded. So deck building should go up a little bit. Unfortunately, we lose key cards like Counter Catcher and Iono, which might make the game a little more tedious in a way, less comeback mechanics overall, but we have yet to see what's in store for us in the future, and Always initially the first few months of a new format or a new rotation feel very awkward, but as time goes on, things start to stabilize a lot more. So looking forward to it. Let me know what decks you're looking to try out in this new metagame, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!